8th, 2024. We'll call the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting to order. We'll take a roll call alphabetically to say that we're present. Woody Chidick.
Aye, present.
Mike Dickey.
Aye. Or here.
Currently, well, Matt Watkins is here, and currently David McMorris, Lee Darce, and Charlie Higginson are all absent. So we do have a quorum. The event, and we're joined by Tom Callahan of the Planning Board. Tonight's meeting agenda is strictly one item, a presentation and discussion on the Planning Board's zoning bylaw amendments. So we can hand it over to Tom. Tom, I just have one question too. Are we at a spot where we're looking to get, I'll call them endorsements, but votes to appear on the town warrant, or is that at a different date?
Preferably. I would like to minimize my appearances as much as I can, but if you want to see me in November, that's fine.
Excuse me, when is the town meeting itself?
I think it's early December.
Early December. And when does the warrant go to press?
I have no idea.
I was going to say, I'm not sure.
I'm
I would
assuming.
like to think that the whole zoning board can chime in, but because of the election, we don't meet until what, the 11th, Julie, or something like that?
For November,
Yeah,
it's the 12th.
12th. Well, it's pretty late. Unlikely that we're going to meet, I'm guessing, Tom, before the warrant goes to press.
Well, none of the controversial ones aren't going forward. And we're having our public hearings starting tomorrow night. On 6 of the 7 are scheduled for tomorrow night, and 1 is scheduled for the 16th, and whatever overflow we have from tomorrow night, because we have a regular agenda as well. I would really just encourage you to participate in those, and, because
Yeah, well,
I don't know
Matt,
that we're
I
going to
would-
do a lot of rewriting after the public hearing, so.
Matt, I would think though that tonight or whenever we could at least 3 of us, I mean,
Yeah, because Woody, I think, all right, Tom, I think Woody's point was, like if you had a 6-person vote versus a 3-person vote on the warrant, it might be more impactful.
Yeah, well, you can do that on the day of town meeting and caucus
True.
amongst yourselves.
that's true.
As
Yeah.
usual, my usual
I mean,
thing.
it is
to
what
have
it is.
Last minute nitpicky nonsense, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
And so I appreciate your meeting tonight, and I know the schedule is tough, and I still got to meet with advisory at some point. But our public hearings, because of the timing, have to go tomorrow and next Wednesday. This really was at the last possible time we could do it. So anyway, I'll take what votes I can get. You'd like me to come back, just ask, but as far as reprinting and stuff, I mean, I'll take comments privately. I'll participate in the public hearings that we have in the next 2 weeks, and anything we can do. But this has been vetted a lot with town council, with my board, select board. Woody was at least Woody was. I don't know how many of you are online, but Woody and Charlie were at the public forum we held, and so.
Yeah, I was able to see the video. I saw them there in the front row.
I sometimes assume that no comments, and that means there's going to be no comments, but my experience tells me otherwise. Anyway, I forgot my plug-in thing, so I'm just on battery. I'm sure I'll have enough for tonight, but let's just, if we could, just run through this.
Yep.
So the first 2, they've been reorganized as you see them here, at least in the way I want to present them at town meeting, from kind of simple to less simple. The controversial ones, the switch of residential zoning to FAR and the change in frontage are being put off. There's just not enough support on the planning board. They want to study it more. They don't know what they want to study, frankly, but they want to study it. And if those come forward, it won't be until the spring. They're on the public hearings already noticed, so they'll just be postponed or withdrawn at public hearings tomorrow night. Also, the change in the residential cluster bylaw, which was kind of tied to whether we made any changes to frontage, that's going to be put off. So instead of 10 articles, there's 7. And, you know, everything in the zoning bylaw will have been looked at this point. I'm looking at these 7 as being the final go-around. I have no illusions that the planning board is going to change its mind about the other things. So, you know, and then the other things are, you know, the whole integrity of what we've changed in the zoning bylaw doesn't depend on the other 3 passing or not. The bylaw can stand with the current way we regulate things or with those new things. So, you know, I don't want to spend a lot of time on those. I'll take any questions as I did at the forum, but, you know, those aren't going forward at all. So the 7 that are left, a lot of it is housekeeping. A lot of it is, there is one new item that'll be the last thing we discuss, and that's going to be the subject of the public hearing on the 16th. That's about putting in an impact development bylaw. Impact and development impact and mitigation bylaw, is how we would characterize it. So the first 2 are to deal with reforming the wind energy and solar energy bylaws. Most of this is housekeeping to simplify what are long bylaws that were written. I don't know, what were they, 12 years ago, 10 years ago? Woody, maybe longer.
Yeah, this never
Written by
really
the AEC at the time.
come before the zoning board, really. but-
Yeah, they were written by the AEC at the time, and they're long. And the main thrust of both of these, I mean, as far as solar goes, the things we had to do to permit solar panels on individual roofs, those were changed last fall in Article 4. The Attorney General's office wanted to see solar provisions in Article 4, you know, our uses article. That was all done. So both the wind energy and the solar energy bylaws continue to just regulate large-scale facilities. We talked with the Energy Committee about maybe permitting, you know, individual turbines on a smaller scale and individual houses or in, you know, groups of buildings, but they tell me that the technology and the feasibility of doing that on that scale just isn't there, and the cost effectiveness. So we're not doing any regulation about that to permit that. So the wind energy bylaw still is just regulating the very large generating facilities, and similar with what the solar bylaw is doing. And the thrust of both of them was to take out materials that might need to be changed more quickly, such as application procedures as we increasingly move from paper to electronic applications, and some of the provisions about deactivating and decommissioning these sites, which will change with changes in technology, to just move them out of the bylaw, greatly shorten the bylaw, and move them into regulations that can be amended more easily. And, you know, I will be shortly before town meeting bringing out, you know, a revised set of regulations at the planning board. And I don't know if you guys have anything that's specific that I'm not aware of, but just redoing the zoning related regulations so that, and get the public hearing scheduled and get those amended to be in place before town meeting goes, so we can hit the ground running with them. So the substance of both of these bylaws are not changing. The substance of what's moving to regulations is not changing. It's just housekeeping to make the bylaw simpler to read, just dealing with what needs to be dealt with in a bylaw, taking the stuff that's going to change more rapidly or more frequently into regulations where they can be amended more quickly. Still with a public process. To do regulations, the planning board has to conduct a public hearing on that. So unless there's any specific questions, those are pretty straightforward and simple.
Okay, does anyone on the board have any questions about those first 2?
And by the way, if none of you are aware, the AG approved all the changes from the Springtown meeting. So the bylaw has been now reorganized. So the wind and solar bylaws are no longer separate articles. They're part of section 10 about alternative energy. So all of that's been done and approved by the AG's office.
Yeah, we did see that. Thanks. Congratulations. Um, yeah, I don't see that we have any questions then on the first two. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Mike and Woody, you guys are all set?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we can go
And
to,
I will go to the AEC to give them one. I've been dealing with a subcommittee, but I'll have to go back to them too to run this by them again. But you can see, and I think in this text, the document, all the way at the end was the stuff that was moving. And I don't know if we're going to print all that for town meeting, but
But you're not changing anything
no,
substantive.
the substance is not changing at all.
So it's an edit, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the large scale solar facilities, you know, we have one at the town landfill. They were previously permitted in the technology business district on 3A. They're now permitted because of the change in the zoning district in all of 3A, in the commercial districts of 3A. But again, there's no space to put any of this space requirement, so there's no space to put any, but that's really the only
yeah,
major.
most of the stuff you'd see would probably be exempt, right? It'd either be the town looking to put it on facilities or the
Yeah.
MBTA or
Yeah.
someone along those
Yeah,
lines.
and a lot of what we did with the changes of uses to Article 4 last fall, that the judge told us the AG's office wanted us to do would deal with municipal buildings and things of that sort. So, I mean, basically, for the first time, we permitted rooftop solar, which has been allowed, but was never actually permitted by the bylaw. Okay, so if you want to, but you know, I'll leave it to you guys if you want to vote now or later when you have more of your members, that's fine. But I mean, if I know that there's not going to be any text changes to this one, then I'm not going to worry about a vote necessarily.
Yeah, unless anyone on the board disagrees, maybe we'll have you walk through each of them, and then at the end we can determine if we wanted to take an individual vote on each of them.
Okay. Sure. And I'll scream when my battery is dying. But, all right, so the next one that we're going to put, you know, and originally in our lineup, it was the 10th article, it was the one we added at the end at your request. This is, so it'll now be presented, hopefully it's the third article at town meeting because it's really simple and straightforward. This is to bring back a note that was inadvertently omitted when we redid the dimensional regulations. It's regarding setbacks to those relatively rare, you know, as Woody explained it at the public forum, the relatively rare instances where we have roads that have less than a 40-foot right-of-way. And to measure how you measure the center line. So I'm sure at the time when the judge was writing the table of dimensional regulations, she didn't understand this, but we didn't even discuss this back then. It was truly just an inadvertent authorship. You know, she probably didn't understand what it was intending to do. And so we're glad to put it back in. That's this one here, PB10.
Tom, and I think in the meeting we had, or you had, there was some understandable confusion. This is a 40-foot right-of-way as opposed to 40 feet of paved roadway, because some people were saying, gee, I live in a road and the road is no more than, let's say, 35 feet. Yes, but the town typically in our town owns grassy stretches. But you don't have to get into it unless
No,
somebody.
but we'll probably have to explain it again, and like at the public forum, to really explain the nuts and bolts of this, Woody, I will call on you.
This is where the right of way is, if you will, 40 feet or less, which puts it into a minor category in my estimation. It's a good thing to have in our toolkit. But it doesn't apply to roadways that are paved at 40 feet or less. It's
Right. And the standard for road design now is a 40-foot right of way, but there were times, years gone by.
And if we need it, we've used it, in my estimation, once a year or so, Matt, don't you think?
Yeah,
I mean, a recent example the planning board came across was the old part of Black Horse Lane. That's, I don't think
Yeah.
that has a 40-foot right of way.
Well, yeah.
And it certainly has narrow pavement, but that would be an example that if you had a project on that part of Black Horse Lane where this might apply, so.
You want to move them away from from an already constrained roadway.
Okay, so, I mean, this one's simple, it's your request, if you want to vote on this one.
Right.
Up to
I'm
you.
in favor of it, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Up to you. So the next one is also in the order of housekeeping. So our floodplain overlay district bylaw is now section 9.4, the new organization. And we got a grant to have MAPC look at this and work on this for us. And there is a new model state bylaw that the state wishes everybody to accept and pass. And our bylaw was pretty close to the state model. So there's really not a lot done here. I don't know. I think this version might show red, but maybe it doesn't. I mean, the changes are minuscule because our current bylaw, whenever it got last amended, was pretty close to what is now the state bylaw. You'll see, yeah, here's a place where you're seeing changes underlined and things crossed out, but it's really fairly minimal housekeeping changes just to be in compliance with the state's request. So again, this one's a relative no-brainer. We were in a lot better shape than we were.
yeah, I heard you review that at the meeting, so makes sense to me. Does anyone on the board have any questions on this one, or? We good?
I mean, I don't know how much you guys actually deal with this bylaw, but you never know. Boundaries aren't changing, but I suppose in the future, if climate change keeps going the way it will, we will see new boundaries at some point. All right, the next one, which will be the fourth that we present, that was called PB6. This was the amendment to the ADU bylaw. So the state passed a new law in August, I believe it was July or August, that basically is now saying that ADUs of 900 square feet or less are allowable as of right. And they, it's another one of their weapons in trying to get the suburban communities and every community to develop more affordable housing. So there is some, the question about whether everything has to be complied with by February. I guess DHCD is going to come out with more enabling regulations by February. But since that was falling in between the two town meetings, we thought, okay, if the changes are relatively simple, let's just change it, even though we amended our ADU bylaw back last fall when we consolidated it into Article 4, the uses. So we're not changing anything we did last fall, which was for the first time to expand the ability of an ADU to be in a separate structure on the property rather than in the house. So we're doing that. That stays, but what we're doing is now incorporating that it's now as of right up to 900 square feet, which was our limit before, but in discussions with various people, Woody included, we are creating a provision which the state law allows us to do to create what is called a large ADU, which would still be, as our current bylaw is, to be allowable by special permit. And we set on the size on that limit is 1,250 square feet. The original purpose of our bylaw in single-family dwellings was not to have two dwellings on one lot. So the ADUs were previously being allowed inside an existing house, but at a size limit. Now we let them on other buildings, but still with the same size limit, because you don't want two equal sized houses. We still don't want that, and that's not what an ADU is. So an ADU is designed to be a smaller dwelling unit, but the thought is that we should allow for some flexibility for a larger one, and what the state is saying is as of right, it is allowable as of right. but keep that as a special permit process so that we make sure that we don't get carried away with these ADUs and again, totally defeat the idea of single-family zoning. So that is the major change, is to, make this differentiation between sizes of ADUs. Otherwise, what we changed in the fall is all staying in place. And, council.
And if they become like,
council take a
if they
vote
become
about-
like homes that are built, or, living spaces that are built above the garages.
Yeah,
to-
yeah, which
you-
we allowed last fall, but for the first time, and I don't know that anybody's seen any applications about them yet, but.
Like, so does the garage space count towards that 900 or 1,200 square feet or not?
The 900 will be as of right.
Oh, no, but Tom, he's talking about the ground floor where you park cars. That doesn't count, right?
No, I don't believe it does.
Because you'd be automatically over in most cases.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
close to it, right? Yeah.
So
No, it's just the living unit.
the living space in it, so, so anyway, I mean, the main thrust of this is to be as quickly in compliance with the new state law as we can be. And, this, council has looked at it, the state law very closely, and yes, they'll have some regulations that may flesh out some details, but this is going to comply with the state law as it's now written. And, with these large units, we're putting in our own flexibility to go a little larger, but by the special permit process. And
Well,
again,
Let
we'll see.
me chime in. Tom knows I've got two objections, not to the substance of this article, which I think is just very satisfactory to me. But it's, I'll call it 10 and 10, because there are two limitations that are legacies from when this bylaw first went into effect in 2003. And I think they, at least at this point, are solutions looking for a problem. The first one is that, but in this case, it's been modified, tweaked a little bit, so that if you have a large ADU, there can be no more than 10 special permits granted a year. I think we're sitting on an inventory of 50, 60, 70. It's been pretty hard to figure. I started this process of identifying a few years ago and didn't seem pointless, but there are a whole bunch of unpermitted ADUs, some of which are small, many of which are larger than 900 square feet, because they're oftentimes single-family dwellings where the principals would like to downsize, but not into a one or even a two-bedroom small unit. But I think a 10% limit on special permits, large ADUs, which is 900, 1250, I guess, is could easily be surpassed by the number of people who have unpermitted / illegal ADUs, and there are a lot in town, a lot, as I say, well over 50, maybe not quite 100. We could clog the system and not add any, not genuinely add any living facilities. It would simply be simply be moving illegal or unpermitted ADUs into the permitted category. My recommendation would be, rather than keep the old 20-year limit that people were afraid that we'd be inundated. We had exactly one permit in over 20 years applied for. I would eliminate that and leave it up to the good judgment of the zoning board in terms, and if for some strange reason we're getting crashed with applications, A, they could be held in abeyance, or B, we could modify this bylaw. But modifying it in advance of a problem, I have a little bit of I
Well-
object maybe more philosophically than anything else. Let me just quickly talk
Yeah.
about the second 10. The other legacy issue is when the ADU inventory gets to 10%, then all these ADUs are capped. I think, isn't that right, Tom? Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
but-
again, that's, to my mind, a legacy, a solution looking for a problem. I'm not sure that Cohasset is going to be inundated with 15% or 18% of its total housing inventory as ADUs. But if it starts to get there, I think it deserves a more thoughtful public discussion about what kind of burden does this put on town facilities? What kind of benefits does it add in terms of affordable housing for people who otherwise have to, who work in Cohasset but can't live here, that kind of thing. I would deal with that later on if it's even a problem.
Yeah, last year we agreed we would see what would happen under the changes before we made these two changes and you know, we did bring up this ADU thing at the last minute because the state brought it up at the last minute, but you know, I hadn't planned for changing this and hadn't designed this to change this. A lot of the units that may exist illegally right now are probably gonna get kept caught by the as of right thing and are gonna be okay.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that if we have that many illegal units, what do we have, 3,200 housing units? We're probably not gonna get to 10% with 50, 60, if that.
Unlikely.
But
But we don't know.
That
We don't
10
know.
No, with the state's changing the landscape with the as of right, so the 10% on the overall, 10% of the overall housing stock, that may have to go, but you know, I'll bring it up to the planning board tomorrow night, but I really don't want to make like a major policy change. As far as the 10 per year, I mean, that was done as a control on this, so it didn't get out of hand. And I think, again, as we said a year ago, let's wait and see what happens. It's easy to take out if we want to take it out, but I would rather wait.
It's not so easy. If it's a bylaw, it takes roughly 2 years to go through the exposure, discussion, approval, Attorney General approval. It
Yeah, and I
takes
don't
quite
think
a
this-
while to make a
I don't
bylaw
think this is
change.
rocket science to change it. And you know, again, in the spring, when I'm not dealing with it, you can knock yourself out. I really don't want to make a major policy change now.
But why not just drop it? Leave it out.
Again, with all due respect, we made this agreement last year and I don't like it bringing Bart back up just because of the fortuitousness that the state decided to change the law, so we need to change the bylaw. I mean, you know, I don't think I think it's simple to drop them both. Because I don't think any of this is rocket science. I can't speak for the rest of my board in that respect. Everything becomes, you know, a study or what's the implications and blah, blah,
Well,
blah.
I've given my point of view.
I know.
So I won't belabor it. I will
I appreciate
stop
it. And I think
opining. I'd like to hear from my colleagues.
yeah, I think the change in the landscape is going to probably dictate that with the as of right provision, but let's wait. You know, I don't have a problem waiting and seeing.
Let's hear from the rest of the zoning board at this
Okay,
point.
go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you have any comment. I think that was my first thought, is that some of them would become just as of right grandfathered in, and we might not have the onslaught that you would potentially think. I guess I don't have I think maybe Tom, your reluctancy to just pull it and not include it is probably more just of the process and how far it's gone and kind of having to go explain the change. I don't know that you're against the edit itself in principle. Just maybe the fact that you'd have to explain it with a little bit more detail. So I don't think that it's necessarily a bad edit, but that's my
Like I said, I can bring it up tomorrow night, and then the planning board, if they edit it, then I gotta go back to the select board and explain it to them. I don't anticipate a problem, but it's just, you know. Again, you know, discussed the same issue a year ago. I get that the state's changed the landscape, but I can't count on other people thinking it's that simple when it is that simple.
When
That's
it's
my
not that
experience.
simple?
No, I think it is simple, but I can't count on other people thinking it's as simple as Woody and I think it is, but that's my experience with this whole process, so. Excuse me if I'm cynical, but I'm cynical.
Mike, do you have any additional thought on it, or?
Well, yeah, I just figure, and God bless you, Tom, but you know, you're the one that's putting all the sweat equity into it. And if you're kind of saying the juice isn't worth the squeeze, I kind of feel I have to defer to you, because if not, then, you'd say, well, then you do it. And I don't want to do it myself,
I mean, think about 10% overall would be 320 or so ADUs. Is that a significant impact? Is as of right going to drive us to that point anyway? If as of right drives us out to that point anyway, take out that 10%. But
Yeah.
the original thought back when the bylaw first passed 15, 20 years ago was, we want to have some control in this process. I mean, the town's changed. Maybe people, there's more people like all of us are a little more senior and now and probably wanting an ADU. I certainly would like to permit an ADU in my house, but I don't know, maybe they
I
come.
don't know.
Go for it. Like I said, I'll bring it up.
What I'm seeing is older couples cashing out and either getting something in a neighboring town or moving up by the Stop and Shop, Avalon.
Yeah,
I'm not seeing a whole lot of older couples kind of passing their house on to the kids in exchange for allowing them to, allowing the parents to stick around in some kind of ADU unit. But
and the thing about ADUs and the stickler with my house is they still have to comply with things like waste disposal, so I'm not sure my septic system could handle an ADU as much as I'd want it. So there are other impediments to doing this. I don't think it will ever get that far out of control. But I think until we see the impact of the as of right and how many good-minded citizens come to legalize their illegal ADUs, let's see. 50 to 60 surprises me, but if that's the number, that's the number. It's not 320, but again, I'll bring it up. I don't mind bringing it up, but kind of again, part of it is just I thought we put this issue to bed a year ago and to just wait and see how the new bylaw works.
Okay,
Anyway.
well, I think we had
Well, I'll let
good discussion on it.
Yeah,
I don't know, do you have anything else to add, or you?
it is
No,
what it is.
it's more of a philosophical approach to, designing bylaws as opposed to, there are a lot of what ifs, but I'm not opposed to this bylaw. B, I'm certainly could buy into what Tom's saying about 10% and no more than 10 large, but the 10 large gives me more of a problem than 10%, because it could well be that there are, but
Well, we don't know.
we don't know. We don't know. That's the thing. Nobody's come forth because the prior bylaw was onerous, and
Yeah, and nobody's probably going to come forward unless we started enforcement, and
yeah,
we all know we're not going to do that.
except Tom, at some point, people are going to want to be, I think, concerned about title, kind of clearance and things of that sort. If there's something illegal, technically illegal, it's not offending their neighbors. Don't get me wrong; they're not doing anything, in my estimation, bad, but they might want to just have a clear, title change. It's possible that could happen, but we could deal with it when that rears its head too. I mean, it's not,
Okay.
I raise it as an issue. Should we anticipate or wait until?
Okay, well, let me get to the next one then. The next one is the new one. So at this point, don't remember when the discussion of this kind of bylaws came up. I think it came up during the bylaw committee and maybe even as long ago as when the working group existed, but it certainly came up with the planning board when we had to deal with the recent subdivision on Black Horse Lane, because we wanted some mitigation for the potential impact on the old part of Black Horse Lane, and we really didn't have the authority to ask for it or demand it. You know, like most cases, it's a matter of negotiation. So we wanted to have some tool where we at least have the authority to ask for it, and all of this bylaws may. Planning board and the zoning board in granting permits may ask for this, may ask for that, as long as you find that there's going to be some kind of significant impact on, you know, the impacts we can regulate are environmental, historic, trees and vegetation, and infrastructure and pedestrian safety and utility capacity. We can't do the impact on school populations and the increase in school populations. That's just outside what we're allowed to do. So this will give us a tool, both boards, to do it. And, you know, there was a lot of discussion on the planning board. A couple of our members live up in the north part of town and along Howe Road and Tad Lane. There's been a lot of development and blasting of house lots that are not part of a subdivision because they all each individually had frontage on their respective roads, but were being built at the same time, I think in some cases by the same developer. And, you know, how do we regulate that? You know, and we can't regulate everything, which at one point, we can't regulate every single family construction, and because not all of them are going to have significant impacts. If trucks damage a roadway, yeah, there's already recourse for the town in that situation. So the important thing to start with here is, what is it that might trigger our ability to ask for what is going to be called a development impacts assessment? That's this paragraph C. So the applicability is here. And so what town council came up with is that in any project that requires either a special permit or a site plan review, so that will capture commercial projects on 3A, it'll capture the village, which has both site plan and special permit, and it'll capture the harbor, which is under your jurisdiction for special permits. So all the commercial projects will be captured. And then for residential, it's going, anything that's subject to large house review, which is surviving at the moment, which is a form of residential site plan review, and then subdivisions, but as long as they're 3 lots or more. You know, the one on Black Horse Lane, the actual subdivision we dealt with was only on one side of the street, and it was 4 lots, but they're the ones we were getting. The other side of that street was all being developed through Form As, not subdivisions, but, you know, there's going to be 8 to 10 lots up, new houses up there at some point. So, you know, we wanted the capability to be able to deal with certain large-scale development, residential as well as subdivisions, and that's what this is doing. And again, when you go through all this language, it's may. There's going to be a development impact assessment that you can ask for. And then, well, it's shall in that case, and then then the boards, your board and mine, are going to have to make individual decisions on whether there needs to be some mitigation, and that could be physical work, and it could be financial offsets. And so the inspiration for this came from both, originally, the original draft I did was Hanover's bylaw. Hanover has one of these and Dedham has one of these, but in both cases, they're geared toward dealing with their large scale commercial developments on Route 53 in Hanover and Route 1 in Dedham. You know, so we did ask town council, I tried it first, but then asked town council to try to cohasitize this with the concerns that the planning board was raising about certain types of residential development. this part here about mitigation of loss in trees, we may take this out. This came from Milford or Medway or Milford, Medfield, Medway, Milford, one of those, Medway or Medford's bylaw, Medfield's bylaw that Carolyn found. But since this somewhat overlaps in Concom jurisdiction, we may take this out, not to create, you know, confusion or unnecessary duplicity with Concom's jurisdiction overlap. Stormwater bylaw is triggered by 5,000 square feet of alteration, so it covers a lot of things. But again, the impacts on traffic, infrastructure, historical resources, environmental resources, that's what we can address. And at least it gives us something in our back pocket to at least make the request rather than depending on good faith and negotiation. And a lot of this is geared toward what may or may not happen with development in the MBTA Communities District. That, of course, if the MBTA Communities District survives, I don't know if you know that there was oral argument on the SJC on Monday regarding Milton's challenge to that law. So we could find out in a few months that the SJC throws the whole thing out and we repeal that zoning, but to the extent it stays, you know, that is a kind of large-scale development that we want to prepare for. And I think we all know from already current experience that developments in the harbor and the village and commercial developments on 3A would certainly call for having something like this. So that's it in a nutshell. Our town council, who is the author of this form, will be at our public hearing on the 16th. She will not be at our public hearing tomorrow night, but she'll be there to answer some more questions about this. But it is unique for a town of our size, but we think for what Cohasset has faced and could be facing, it's probably beneficial that we at least have this tool in our toolbox.
Tom, can we go back to section B, applicability? It's just a simple,
Yep.
right. In this instance, I do have a substantive issue. I did have the opportunity to email Carolyn, who town council, who emailed me back and suggested that there is a kind of a very small but pernicious flaw in the wording here. And that is, if you go down to line 3, is subject to a special, you know, this is what's included.
Yep.
Is subject to a special permit or site plan review under Article 4.
Mhm.
The problem is that anything under Article 8, which is non-conforming structure, the way this reads is that this would supersede or at least interfere with Article 8, which is right out of Chapter 40A,
Mhm.
which deals with the one test of a non-conforming use or structure is it significantly more detrimental to the neighborhood. And her suggestion is that, yeah, that kind of went under the radar screen at the moment. I would not want to be in conflict with this total bylaw.
And what did she say about the fact
She
that
said that if it accepted or exempted, she didn't provide wording per se, but subject to a special permit or site plan review under Article 4 use regulations, except those subject to Article 8 or those subject to Article 8, you know, you work.
I hear what you're saying, and just I'm curious as to what she would have said she wrote it.
She said it's clearly,
It
this
just
bylaw does
refers
not
to
apply to special permits issued to pre-existing non-conforming structures or uses pursuant to Article 8, and that she would be in touch with you and Cassandra to, you know, it's probably a phrase. It's nothing
Yeah,
more
I'm
than
just
a phrase
curious as to what she
exempting.
said, because it just refers to Article 4. By not referring to Article 8, you could say it doesn't apply to Article 8, so.
Well, but this says, but an Article 8 nonconformity could be subject to a special permit or site plan review under Article 4.
Yeah.
It'd be better just to
Yeah, no, I
avoid
hear,
an
I hear
internal
what you're saying.
conflict.
The alternative to that is probably how the planning board's gonna deal with large homes, because it's just a single residence. Is to
Right, but if you've
is to
got a
say there-
nonconformity,
where there is no impact, so we're not gonna make you do anything. But we still, at least it gives you the opportunity for the scrutiny. That's my only counter argument to that, because it's the same argument about large home review, because large home review is only gonna apply to a single house at a time. It's not gonna be a multiple house development, those are gonna be captured otherwise.
but you don't want, in my estimation, we shouldn't want this article, overall article, to be in conflict in any way with Article 8, which is,
No, it's giving you the scrutiny, though, to say, I mean, my only argument again is that it would just give you the opportunity for scrutinizing if a particular single-family home nonconformity alteration was somehow creating an adverse impact on the various pieces of.
well, if it creates an adverse impact, it falls under the not significantly more detrimental to the neighborhood. And that's the only test it has to meet. It doesn't have to meet any of these other tests. So I would avoid,
Yeah, but it could be not substantially more, well, how many times do you actually turn something down, number one, and for that? And number two, it could be not substantially more detrimental if in a unique case.
well, then
had mitigation.
this and other
mitigation
considerations are before the zoning board, but it's not singular and it doesn't trump the
Right.
ultimate kind of standard of not significantly more detrimental
No,
to
I
the
hear you.
neighborhood. It has to have an adverse economic impact on the neighborhood to be turned down. And that's embedded in probably, I would posit, 500 court cases
Yeah,
in the Commonwealth.
I made a note to it at the public forum when you
So
brought it.
I think a simple exemption.
I'm just waiting for her to get back. I know she's.
All right, but I'm just suggesting to you and the board that a simple exemption of Article 8 properties, I really think is the way to go, because there's no way in God's green earth that the Supreme Judicial Court would rule in favor of a local bylaw trumping what's embedded in really the foundational principle of Chapter 48. It just wouldn't happen. The whole bylaw would be kicked out. I mean, avoid a problem. And it doesn't take anything away. These are all valid considerations for the zoning board. It's just that it's these and others. But when the rubber hits the road, we have it sounds narrow, but it's a fairly rigorous standard.
Well, here's a quickie, but I'll run it by her. She
Do it.
Just this morning, she's really tied up with another town tomorrow.
Yeah, I don't want to wordsmith this,
No,
but I
no,
mean,
I'll
a simple exemption of Chapter 8,
I'll let her do that.
Article 8 nonconformities would make this just dandy.
Yeah, all right, I'll suggest this to her, but let her write it, and then that, again.
I don't know how the board feels. I mean, I don't want to be dominating the back and forth dialogue here. I mean, how do others on the zoning board feel?
I don't have any comment on that particular edit that you made, but on the article itself, I guess my first reaction was I generally looked okay, except I wondered if the kind of abutting property, number 8 kind of is a little bit risky, in that I guess for somebody that operates in the abutting property owner space, I just wonder if you'd be setting yourself up for example, like if a home went to the large home review and you had a property owner show up, does that kind of give you the ability to facilitate direct financial compensation in terms of maybe like reimbursement for office space and hotels and things of that nature to an individual property owner?
What do you need? I'm sorry, I have somebody else now who lives with me who's talking to me. I think he needs.
So like number 8, right? I mean,
no, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think no public authority has, except in very rare circumstances, has the right to force compensation by one owner to another private owner.
So you can just do it for the neighborhood, but I kind
Yeah,
of feel
I
like if you
mean,
look at this and you say, well, financial or otherwise, and then it says abutting properties. So if I'm the two properties on either side
no,
of
it's-
somebody who's gonna do, 8
yeah,
months
it's the
building the
impact,
house.
it's the impact you're looking at, but the mitigation is gonna be something that the town or the developer would have to, for public infrastructure. Jesus. You know what? Let me just run quickly and let him out the back. He'll be on a run. I can leave him there for a while if you give me just a second. But I hear what you're saying, but I don't think either one of our boards would be empowered to, I'm gonna highlight it so I, make sure Carolyn clarifies it. I think that's a good point, but I don't think we have any authority to order a developer, anybody to pay money to another private party.
Yeah, I could just see, I guess you get my point. I could see somebody coming to our meetings and thinking that we do based on how it reads.
Well, I think, like I said, in the case of large home review, I'm sorry. He's a new resident of the premises. I don't think, in large home review, we're actually gonna see any mitigation applied. Because again, the impact of a single family house is gonna usually be minimal. I think it was just to satisfy some of my board's concerns about the kind of development that goes on an individual scale that when multiplied two or three house lots at a time can be, adverse, everybody up in the Howe Road area is apparently suffering from what's been going on up there, and try to make it clear we can't regulate everything, but at least it just gives you the idea to scrutinize it, whether you actually choose to impose some kind of mitigation is a completely different undertaking. And I don't see it, that it's going to be applied to any single family house. All right. Give me
Yeah.
a sec, all right? I'll be right back.
The hound is loose. So basically, the way I read this is that it's advisory. Do others think it's advisory, or are there, is there some sort of administrative authority here to make changes?
Well, in a way, right, it's also calling upon the developer, and in the small case, it could be a resident who's going for a single family home,
Yeah.
large single family home review, right? To almost put together a plan, if I read it right, to put together a plan that addresses these issues, and then it opens the planning board an opportunity to at least have that dialogue, not necessarily enforce it, but
Right.
I think the resident piece of it is kind of what makes me a little bit nervous, in that I think some of the residents in town will look at this as like, we'll put up with a lot of construction noise and impact, and sure, you might help facilitate a sidewalk in the area, but what about this? This almost makes it, I think, maybe a little bit more granular, and like, what does it actually do though for the two closest neighbors versus the neighborhood?
It's, again, that large home review in particular is a site plan review, and at least since I've been chair of the board, I've made it very clear to the abutters that this is not a yes or no. This is not a bylaw that allows us to defeat a project. It's we have 4 criteria we can look at, and the scale of the buildings is one of them. Preservation of landscape is the other, lighting. That's what we deal with, and we condition.
Tom, does this replace 5.3 or whatever it is, large home review?
No, it doesn't replace it. It may be adding a criteria to it, instead of the 4 that we have.
I assume it's been vetted. I honestly haven't done that. There are no internal inconsistencies as far as you know.
As far as I know, I kind of rely on town council for this stuff, but.
Yeah, no, I mean.
Oh, you're right to ask the question because, we had a former judge writing the last go round, and you found the thing that.
My other worry would be how many people would get swept up by this and after surveys and you know, site plans done by engineering firms, et cetera, you know, are they $5, $6, $8,000 in the hole for thank you very much after a 10-minute explication? I mean, I don't know. It could be a financial
I don't, well,
penalty.
personally, I don't
Or-
care about that.
Well,
I
yeah.
think for the types of projects we're seeing with these large home reviews that we're seeing, we're getting into the scale of 6,000 square feet or better. I don't think I think whatever we might ask for here is a drop in the bucket, frankly, and I'm not sensitive to that argument. There are others on my board who are, I'm not, but.
How does this board
Yeah,
feel?
I
I'm
don't,
curious.
again, the simple question with a large home review for a single family house is gonna be, is what you're doing going to have any adverse impact on the infrastructure of the town or potentially your neighbors? The one we deal with that affects the neighbors all the time is the scale of the buildings and the lighting, especially. We deal with the lighting and we condition the lighting in almost every project. But, really, that's not going to cause, it's not going to cause the need for sidewalks. It's not going to cause a need for rebuilding a utility line unless there's something extraordinary that goes on so it's going to allow us to ask a few more questions than we already ask, but it's not going to make us, I think, change the way we do business. And again, it's a site plan. We can't say, no, you can't build this. All we can do is condition it.
Yeah, I would just, in my final comment, I just do think it might give people some false hope that by inserting this language, you're going to be looking
wanna
at
ask
things
that question
through a
you wanna
different
ask-
lens,
Yeah, if you want to ask that question at town meeting, we can certainly disabuse people of the notion. And if it comes up at the public meeting, the hearings in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but I think
But I
you'd
think
want
their
to
counter would be,
include-
then why are you putting it in?
You'd want to anticipate. You don't want to have a town meeting floor fight. If you can help it.
Yeah, no, I'm not encouraging that, obviously, but, why put it in there? Why put it in there? Well, it wasn't, again, the models of Hanover and Dedham would keep this on commercial. So in our case, 3A Harbor Village, but there were concerns expressed by people on my board, 2 of whom live up in the Howe Road, Tad Lane area, who are concerned about these impacts of still large-scale development, even though it's just a single family home.
But what is it? What
I
is
mean, that's why we wanted to go to FAR. That's what it would have addressed that, but
well,
they don't want to take that logical leap. They want to,
well, the FAR is a different issue in my mind, but
well,
here, what is the threshold? Does everybody who qualifies for or who is required, if you will?
large home reviews now since the change we made,
But you said this isn't part of the large home review. It's supplemental to it, right?
it's supplemental to it, yeah.
So
large
anything, but does it say here anything that's required to have a large home review also is required to do this, or is it anybody?
It says here, or subject to large home review under section 5.300, so
I
that
don't,
is
where is that? Okay, or
that is
subject.
houses that are 4,000 square feet or larger. Believe me, again, my complete, I'm a big advocate for getting rid of large home review, but as part of the process of switching to FAR as a measure of house size, but the board isn't there yet.
That's a different.
I know, they're kind of interrelated. The board isn't there yet, but yet we still have members of my board who are saying we have to do something about the scale of.
Well, why not just beef up the large home review bylaw, a section?
Well, I mean, the reason going back 20 years ago, originally it was conceived as a special permit process, but the trigger was within an as of right size. I mean, I think you have to make a clear you have to make a clear distinction between as of right and something else. And so if it becomes a special permit, which it would quote unquote have teeth, it would be something above what is allowed as of right. Right now, what's allowed as of right because of the two-dimensional zoning and a 20% footprint is quite large. And right now, anything that would go over that is a variance process. The proposal for the FAR was to put an FAR in, and I was proposing numbers that the average.
Yeah, but FAR isn't on the
And-
table. Deal with this and existing large home review article that are.
If
supplemental.
FAR came in, large home would go. There would not be a large home review process. There would be an FAR.
But it's
building
now.
in, we were building in.
This isn't maybe in the future. Right now, we don't have FAR, so let's deal with what's on the
Right, so we
books
have
and
a
what's
large
being
home review
proposed.
process, and it's a site plan review, and just like for commercial site plan review, you're going to trigger at least this analysis. Are you creating adverse impacts on town infrastructure, various aspects of town infrastructure and character? And if you are, the planning board's gonna have the tool of ordering some mitigation, and if you're not, you're not.
Well, are you saying ordering or suggesting mitigation?
This is gonna give us, either board, the power to order it. We don't have that power, but it's discretionary about whether we exercise the power. It's not a shall. It's, you have to have this development impact, and if there is an adverse impact that you find, you will have the ability to order in mitigation.
And if I don't, as a homeowner, wish to comply, I have to obey the order.
Why are people coming up with these weird things? Well, you might not
Well,
comply with our current bylaws, and so you don't get to do what you want to do. People do not have the unfettered right to do whatever they want. I will
No, I would simply like
argue that to the
clarification. I'd
bottom.
like clarity, Tom, not, pro or con. The fact is that this gives enforcement power that the large home review doesn't give. Is that basically where we come out?
The large home review process allows us to condition projects that, for example, lighting. When we do that, we condition it that you shall use this kind of lighting. You shall not shine lights onto your neighbors. That is almost standard operating procedure at this point. On the scale of buildings, I'm trying to think if we've done it lately, but we would have the authority now to condition and say, your house is going to be out of scale to the neighborhood, cut it back. As a matter of fact, on the Windy Hill ones, because they were grandfathered undersized lots, we did originally have a condition to try to limit those houses to 4,000 square feet. And then council, either that was challenged, I think it was challenged, and then we reopened the permit and renegotiated it, but that's something we could do, but we don't ever do it. I mean, even a 10,000 square foot house, we didn't stop that. We didn't stop the 9,000 one that's being built down on Cunningham Bridge. So we don't exercise the authority that we already have, and this isn't changing that. It's just saying now, in addition to the scale of the building in respect to the neighborhood, and then make sure the lighting doesn't go and you don't mess up the landscaping too much. If you destroy a road or a sidewalk or some infrastructure utility in the town, yeah, we're gonna make you fix it. Rather than going to litigation to make you fix it, And that is to respond to concerns raised by members of the board about what's going on in North Cohasset with the development up there, which has also included a lot of blasting and a lot of disruption to people up there. Developer comes in right now, even for a big single family house, and destroys a road. Developer, the guy at Cunningham Bridge, say the truck comes and goes over the bridge, knocks out the guardrail. Yeah, they're gonna have to fix it, but
I'm looking at the last.
You're going to have to go into litigation to this. Now, you could put it in a permit that if you do this, you will fix this,
Well, I don't read it that way. Take a look at D, the last sentence in the introductory paragraph. To the extent that any mitigation is proposed for private property, such mitigation may be recommended by the planning board or zoning board of appeals, but is subject to the consent of the property owner. Subject to the consent. So, which means that it's a voluntary compliance. I would hope that in most cases, property owners do take that advice as, I mean, that decision as advice and.
Yeah, that's mitigation of private property. So as an example of Black Horse Lane where this would have come up, in a perfect world, we wanted a sidewalk to go from the subdivision all the way out to Summer Street.
Yeah,
And we could not do that because the town didn't own the land where that sidewalk would be built because of the much narrower right of way. It was private property, and we could not order that developer to put a sidewalk over private property. All that last sentence is saying is you still can't do it unless you have the consent of those private property owners along, in that case, the old section of Black Horse Lane. And some may have given consent and some might not have, and then you would have had gaps in the sidewalk. So we couldn't do that. We didn't have the authority to do that, and this isn't going to give anybody the authority to do that. So, we ended up getting a sum of money for the future repaving of the old part of Black Horse Lane based on an estimate DPW gave us. That's all we're getting.
So should that read, so should you qualify private property and make it clear that when we're talking private property, we're talking private property that is not the property that is the subject of the hearing, right?
But that's, I
don't know, maybe it's evident in the whole.
It's evident, if it's evident to me, I think it, but I get it where it's not evident to everybody. I'm highlighting it so that I can address it with Carolyn. But this is not giving us authority that we can't exercise now. It's not creating
it's
that.
advisory, the way I read it.
Well, but I understand what Tom's saying, Woody. And if private property is not with respect to the identified improvement project, but third party owned private property, then yeah, that qualifier, I think, makes it more clear that you can't require the developer to muck about with somebody else's property, but you do have power to tell the developer that they have to do certain things with respect to the identified improvement project property.
Correct. And so, and the Black Horse Lane will give the perfect example of how that works, because what we wanted, we couldn't order because it was private property. What we got is somewhat of a less good half-ass mitigation on the public portion, which is the roadway, the pavement of Black Horse Lane.
Tom, I think that part you just changed would be clearer if it said, to the extent that any mitigation is proposed to be located on a third party's private property.
Okay. I'll bring this up to Carolyn.
Yeah. And I apologize, I was dealing with an earlier version that didn't speak about the third party.
Okay. All right, well, we'll bring all of these to Carolyn's attention. I already have some notes from the public forum that we did about this, so. Just need to get it to her before Friday, that's all. All right. Again, we're not dealing with this in a public hearing until the 16th, so there's plenty of time to weigh in with any other comments to Carolyn on this.
Yeah, Tom, I hate to kind of beat a dead horse. I'm still a little confused as to how you would distinguish or discriminate between a project that would have to go through large home review and a project that would go through this review? Or is it possible that some or many large home reviews will also have to go through this as well?
No, this is saying here that all of them will go under this review. Whether the planning board chooses to request or order any mitigation is a completely separate inquiry. And my expectation, based on the way the planning board deals with large home reviews, it won't, because a single family house, the chance of a single family house having a significant adverse impact on a public infrastructure or a public concern that's under C here is probably slim to none.
Mhm.
But this still requires, right? If I had a 4,500 square foot home that's going in front of a large home, this now requires me to submit this impact plan as
Yep.
part of that process that addresses all these criteria, like as part of submitting my application, right?
Right, and this part here is the one I told you we talked about removing, about the vegetation. I mean, if you're talking about a virgin lot, yeah, you're impacting the vegetation, but Concom's gonna deal with that in their stormwater review.
Yeah.
And the clearing bylaw, you know, the restrictions on clearing is gonna deal with that. So this here is probably duplicative of what we already have. But that would be the only thing, is the development of a virgin lot where you're taking away environmental resources. That would probably be the only case where it would actually come up. But if you're within the clearing limits of the next, that land alteration bylaw, then you're allowed to do it. If you would satisfy Concom under the stormwater bylaw, you're allowed to do it. We're not gonna start prohibiting things.
Tom, could you, for
You know,
me,
what prompted, by the way, the clearing bylaw was in the 2015-16, when a guy developed a virgin lot on Nichols Road and cleared it property line to property line to build a house. And he took away some 100-year-old trees, and the neighbors were going nuts about it. And, so can you theoretically think somebody's gonna put a new large home on a new lot? Like, talk about the one down by Cunningham Bridge. That was an undeveloped lot. There was some particular environmental resource that needed protecting, we could say, okay, you're within the clearing limits, you've satisfied the stormwater permit, you can take the tree down, but we may ask you to contribute to the tree fund because you're doing so, something innocuous like that. I don't think this is going to become a tool to stop.
Tom, I'm in favor of stopping a lot of this raping of the land, et cetera. But help me understand why this shouldn't be part of the large home review bylaw.
Well, first of all, in terms of the structure of the new bylaw, this would become the new Article 11 that was left alone. It was when we consolidated things, Article 11 was
I
left.
mean, why couldn't you make
Have
it
an
part
article,
of?
we in the reorganization that was different than I would have originally proposed it, we wouldn't have had an Article 12, but we do have an Article 12. So right now in the reorganization, we had reorganized everything from 1 through 10 and then had a 12. So 11 was sitting there. And Carolyn did suggest that this could be chopped up and put into different places throughout the existing bylaw. And my thought from an organizational point of view is not to chop it up and have it, mitigation sections all over the place, but to have it in one place. It'll be easier to read and follow, to find it all in one place. What does it apply to? It applies to these things. And I just think organizationally, it's easier to read than moving things all over the place.
So there would be some properties that wouldn't make the large home review threshold, but would still be subject to this, basically. That's why you're separating it.
Woody, it's pretty clear. For residential, it's going to be you're either subject to large home review or you're a subdivision under the subdivision control law of 3 or more lots, period. So if you're not subject to large home review, you're not subject to this unless you're within a 3-lot or better subdivision.
Okay, so
That's the only 2 places where residences are captured by this. The commercial is caught by this. The mixed use in the harbor and the village is caught. Well, there is no mixed use in the harbor anymore, but the commercial in the harbor and 3A is captured and the mixed use in the village is captured.
I just don't think it belongs as a standalone article myself, but
So,
who knows? I mean, there are a lot of good principles in this, but in this.
Yeah, and it would,
write-up.
well, all right, I'm not gonna argue with this, but Carolyn thought the same thing, and I said, this is not, the bylaw, part of this whole process was to make it easier to follow and to read and to get rid, we still haven't moved every definition to Article 2, but we moved a lot of them. And the idea was not to have things like that repeat themselves spread all over the place and just have it in one easy to read, easy to find spot. And that's what this is doing. And this is pretty clear as to what it's applying to. Could I add to 5.5? Oh, by the way, see Article 11? Sure, I could. I could do that. Or Article 4 too, see Article 11, but it's, I don't want to get into organizational nitpicking at this point of the game. We've reorganized the bylaw, it's done.
Yeah, I guess one thing to think about is, somebody gets up at a town meeting and says, if this was in place, I've been listening to hammering ledge and if this was in place before it was permitted, it would have been a great thing because we could have got mitigation as part of it.
Not necessarily. What this doesn't address is the very situation that two of my members are complaining about on Howe Road and Tad Lane. Because you can't capture it all. It would be unreasonable restriction on development. And I keep telling everybody the Massachusetts zoning law is designed to condition projects, not prohibit them. There's limits to what we can do, and I try to explain this to some of my members that just don't get it, and the people who are complaining about blasting who just don't get it, and we can't capture it all. But what happened on Howe Road is, as I said before, there were individual lots not subject to a subdivision next to each other and being simultaneously developed, 2, 3 at a time, with blasting, with chipping. They're not going to get captured by this. Simply not. If we have to capture them, we're going to capture every development in town. We can't do that. That's totally unreasonable.
Yeah. No, that makes sense to me. I just think, the people that have been annoyed by construction are going to see this as kind of some new teeth for your board to have, and maybe set yourself up a little bit for disappointment when they show up to the meeting and say, what do you mean you don't have the right to do it? You do now, and whether it's
We have the right, your board and ours has the right to do a lot of things that we don't do because it still has to be supported. What we do has to be supported by appropriate findings. And each individual case is going to be different. And, you just don't say something is substantially more detrimental. You have to justify.
But I mean, I think it might be reasonable to have, noise canceling headphones or provide office space for people that are listening to that. I guess if the board all said, hey, we think it's reasonable, then I guess this would allow us to say, hey, as part of your development, you've got to get, provide office space in town for folks that are bothered by
That doesn't say this. The things we can do are here, right? We're looking at these things. But other than
it's mitigation. It's
Well, it's
mitigation for
number
noise,
8.
mitigation for dust, mitigation, financial or otherwise.
I mean, that's this number 8. Number 8 may be overreaching, frankly.
I mean, not that I'm against it, but I just think that
No, I know, but
people
you
are going to be
can't-
rthink for it because they think that it's going to yield them something that it doesn't.
I hate that the harsh reality is that the people are still allowed to develop their properties under Massachusetts law. And if you choose to work from home, fine. I mean, too bad. I don't think you get special rights because all of a sudden people are starting to work at home. I don't know how many many
like,
people.
I don't know
I
how
don't know how
Cambridge,
many
like,
people are
I don't know how
listening to and
Cambridge's
going to listen to
bylaw
this,
reads, but like, I'm seeing this a lot in
Oh,
Cambridge.
I know, but there gets to be a point where we on the boards have to tell people that there are limits and they need to be
Yeah.
reasonable until there's things we can do and there's things we clearly can't do. And I'm dealing with that somewhat with members of my own board who should know better, but that there's just, the law is what it is and we can only do so much. Now, these houses on Howe Road, if they were 4,000 square feet or better, probably they are, yeah, then they'd come under this, but not just for the fact that they're being developed the way they're being developed.
Okay, does anyone, I think we've talked this one. I guess you've got some good feedback to
Yeah, I mean,
consider. Does anyone else have any comments on this one?
and the next set of amendments is, is getting to some of these issues about blasting and stuff. And again, there's a sentiment on my board about we should stop it all. I'm like, well, no, we can't stop it all. But nothing in Massachusetts zoning law supports stopping it all unless you want to compensate somebody by a regulatory taking. Massachusetts has a pretty tough standard to get to a regulatory taking, unlike federal law, but still, if you want to prevent development altogether, be ready to open up the checkbook. And people need to understand that, dealing with these sentiments on my own board about, making this land alteration bylaw stronger than it is. So if we can get to that for a minute, I'm looking at the battery thing on my computer, but, the big thing about the land alteration is we're not, first of all, was to simplify its text. When it was, changes to this were proposed by the citizen group that I was part of in 2017, and it got a majority vote, but fell short of 2/3 by 6 votes. And then changes were done by the working group members, and it had a lot of references to zoning code, assessor code classifications, which I think are unnecessarily confusing. So we're taking a lot of that out. The big changes of this are to take away some of the exceptions to the earth removal and ledge removal sections. The clearing thresholds haven't changed. The big thing about the clearing thresholds is taking away the exception for the really small lots. We had an exemption of any lots under 18,000 square feet, which is the minimum lot size in Residence A. If there's any virgin lots left in Residence A and they're under 18,000 square feet, unless they're grandfathered, they can't be built on to begin with. So we don't think this is a giant change. But in the earth removal part, again, the bylaw is intended to regulate just the removal of exposed ledge face, removal or alteration of exposed, because that's the visual quality of the town we're trying to preserve with this. And we exempted any visible ledge face from the regulation if it was done in construction with the main house, utilities, and all accessory structures. So what we are doing here to address situations that the public is pointing out to us, and I think the one down by Cunningham Bridge is the current poster child, is to take away the exceptions for the accessory structures. You will still have the main structure and the utilities, meaning you can remove the ledge face there without a permit. But now for all other removal or alteration of exposed ledge, you will need the special permit process. And the special permit, again, as you know, is not necessarily a yes or no. It could be, but it's got to meet the substantially more detrimental standard. So it's not an absolute by taking away these exemptions, we're not saying it's an absolute prohibition against removing exposed ledge in these areas. It's just saying it's going to go under scrutiny. That's all. scrutiny of the special permit process, and that's the big thing we're doing with this. To try to ratchet back the amount of earth removal and ledge removal that is going on what's left. I mean, we're developing the marginal properties that weren't developed because of their ledge for a reason in the past, and that's what's getting developed now. Otherwise, the bylaw stays the same. The one thing that I will point out, though, and I just saw it, but now I gotta find it again. Oh, it goes back to the definition. On the definitions that apply to this, we needed to distinguish between garages that are attached to the primary structure, which get the exemption, and those that aren't. But the definition of exposed ledge face, I mean, the existing definition is this unhighlighted part, and it's the obvious. It's what's exposed and what you can see. Some members of the planning board want this part put in. Also regulating the subsurface rock 15 feet from the exposed ledge face. 15 feet is an arbitrary number. The argument I think you'll hear from members of the board is, it's about the structural integrity of the ledge. This is where I honestly think some of the members are getting a little carried away at what we can do and what we can't do.
Tom, has your board considered the difference between subsurface rock formation that's maybe a foot beneath the soil versus a drop off that goes down 10 feet?
No,
You could go down 10 feet and over and still be within the 15 feet from the exposed area, but that's ludicrous, right?
I think that the addition of this is relatively quick, relatively last minute. I don't know that
I'll bet you they haven't thought about that.
I don't know it's been completely thought through by those proposing it. I'm not totally on board with it. Because that could happen, but the exposed ledge face is being assumed, I think, by this number. And again, 15 feet is just arbitrarily chosen. That
You're assuming it's a relatively
it's a relatively, kind of gradual phase off, and it just happens to have a piece of soil over it.
I think that's unfortunate wording.
Yeah, I'm not so, again, I think this is going to be the one controversial thing we talk about in our hearings, and I'm not so sure it will survive the hearings, but one of the things, let me just, I can't find it. I need to find it, but one of the things about ledge that's just under the surface, we have, where did we put it? Jesus, we put it somewhere, but I think in my tenure of the planning board, we've had one of these special permits, and it was for the Actors Row House, which I thought was being torn down and replaced, and hasn't happened yet. But there was a lot of exposed ledge on it, and it's part of the scenic character of the area and the property. And there was a piece of exposed ledge that they wanted to put a small pool house on, and the owner proposed to us uncovering ledge in another area that was just below the surface of the soil, and have that visible from the street as much as this piece of ledge was. And so it was similar to how you're going to fill a wetlands. You have to replicate what you're going to fill somewhere else. We call this ledge replication. And we've incorporated, and I just can't find where it is, but we've incorporated that as a thing that the planning board, or whoever's, the planning board's doing the special permits, would require. So, I mean, I forget where it is, but it's another, just a tool, another tool of that the board can use to, say we're not going to stop you from doing your project, but you're taking away ledge that's part of the visual appeal of the community, where if it's a foot below the surface, expose it somewhere else. And we think that's a good idea, so we incorporated that, but again, it's a may. We're not gonna order that in all circumstances. So taking away the exemptions, again, the purpose of it is just to put it through the special permit process and have it go under some form of scrutiny by the planning board and the public. Whereas
Now, I
next,
remember the clearing piece of it, Tom, right? Went a little bit off the rails at one of the town meetings where, like these 70%, 75% of the total
Yeah,
lot
that-
area, people.
yeah, those we haven't changed the numbers on the clearing.
Yeah.
We're
So I
not
think like
changing-
some people's feedback I recall at the meeting was, so do I hire an arborist to come in to determine like how many trees are on my property and what quantifies 70% of the total lot area? And then people kind of piggybacked onto those comments, and that's kind of what took it off the rails a little bit. Like people had a hard time, I think, quantifying
It's still,
trees to lot area, that
Yeah.
are homeowners.
and the citizens petition got a majority vote, and then it passed the next year with the amendments, and the amendments from the citizens petition was to add the exemptions. So I think that's an easy concept, and we all know that a developer can, the engineers that they hire can tell you this in an instant, and what coverage is, or whether it's a structure or with vegetation, they can tell you what it is. It's not a hard computation to make.
But this is for developed lots too, right? So I mean, if somebody
Yes.
wanted to,
But the limits we applied to how much you can clear is unchanged from what it's always been. So. Actually, this probably has to go. Number 6 probably has to go. So, the only thing with the clearing, again, the only thing we were changing on the clearing aspect was the exemption of small lots. But, since the bylaw amendment, I mean, the bylaw from 2005 to 18, I don't know that there were any permits, although I wasn't on the board all those years, but since I've been on the board in what, early 20 or 19, whenever I got talked into this, 19, we've seen just one permit. And I think the exemptions are just excluding so much of the development from any form of scrutiny, and that's where people are getting upset by how much is being blasted away. And again, as I've said this to people at various meetings, it's still, we're only regulating what you can see, because that was the target, was to the visual quality of class, not what is underground. And I think there are some people, including on my board, who would like to take that further and regulate it all, but we can't. Then you're getting into the regulatory taking territory.
all right, does anyone on this board have any additional comments on the land alteration?
I do not.
Or me neither.
Make a note to myself.
Okay, and that's the last one, right, Tom?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Indeed.
Dave, we
The
talked a
real
little bit about,
the real controversial stuff, like I said, we're not doing. What a
yeah.
shame.
We talked a little at the beginning, Dave, if we wanted to like potentially vote on some of them tonight, or because our next meeting is not the first week of November, it's the second week. So just as far as what might appear on the warrant, we weren't sure when the warrant is going to be printed, but I know like the first, it seemed to be anyways, that the first up until I think we got maybe to the land alteration, people seem to be pretty good. I don't know, what's the board want to do? Do we want to take a vote on ones that we're comfortable with taking a vote on now, and these ones that might still have some changes to them, we could consider a vote prior to the warrant being printed, whether it's in the form of I think one time we did even like a daytime meeting that was 15, 20 minutes and just took a vote on them so that it met the warrant deadline.
You
Or
know,
if we
Matt,
wanted to-
even if we didn't meet the warrant deadline, Tom pointed out earlier, appropriately that we could, at the floor of town meeting, say the zoning board voted blank to blank.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be in the warrant. I personally think the last three articles are not yet ready, from a tweaking standpoint, and I'd
Don't-
rather see some more language improvements and reaction to.
Well, with all due
Feedback.
respect, don't hold back on these town meeting. On a personal note, I want to be done with this after this town meeting. I am
Well,
totally,
I'm advocating, Tom, that we
I don't want
prepare
to.
ourselves
I
for
want to
going to
get-
town meeting with a vote of the board, but at this stage, I think there's still more tweaking,
Then
wordsmithing, as
fix
well
them,
as
then help me
substantive
fix them,
tweaking
and
needed.
don't do it postpone these till the spring, all right?
That's not what he's suggesting, Tom. We have another meeting in November. We can vote on the easy ones tonight. We
Yeah,
can vote on the tweaked ones in November. If our recommendation doesn't make it into the warrant, that's not a big deal because our recommendation can be set forth at town meeting. But we'll deal with them before the,
I know, before you got here, I said, come to the public hearings tomorrow and next week. Again,
But if somebody gives you
the public
feedback
hear-
at this
the
public
public-
hearing, Tom, right, and says,
public hearing is,
kind of like we're giving you and says, hey, like this might need to be tweaked.
yeah, well, the
Will,
public
will it,
hearing is the
will the
place.
feedback be, well, it's gonna be a real process for me to take this back to the select board, et cetera, or is it gonna maybe be massaged?
The public hearing is the place for us to tweak,
Okay,
okay? I mean, once the warrant's printed, no tweaking, other than making the thing we want to avoid is an amendment on the floor. I'm not worried about the select board, but I have to go back to them if we've made changes from what I've already presented to them, but I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about having the final text done after October 9th and October 16th. That's what I'm worried about. And I've tried to involve and engage everybody as much as humanly possible, and I know the summer gets in the way, and this gets in the way, and that gets in the way, and we all have other board meetings, but
yeah, no, you've done a great job promoting
just
it and
can't-
everything. I just,
the back and forth.
the feedback that we've given tonight, right, will be also
Yeah,
passed along. I think we're in alignment on like we say, the first few articles, and I guess we've only made some suggestions that we think might help to get it pushed forward on the town floor, because we're trying to identify what either
Absolutely.
us or maybe some red flags that some others might have with it. So
absolutely.
I think that's probably a good,
I'm making notes, and that's what the forum was for. I got a lot of good feedback,
yeah.
usually, mostly from Woody and other town board members on last Monday night, but
so Tom, does this create any problems if we vote on it on November 12th?
no, your vote and your recommendation doesn't matter. It's changes to the text that matter. So
Right.
that suggested changes. I don't want to deal with the all too common wordsmithing on the floor of town meeting.
Yeah, well, that's what
Tell
you're,
me now. Tell
We
me a
just
month
did.
ago. Or tell me at the tomorrow night or at next Wednesday's meeting at our public hearing.
I think you got our
I know, I have.
feelings about it, so incorporate what you get from the other folks at the hearings, and we'll look at it in November and vote on it.
Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry if it's just, I'm hearing postponement and I'm not,
That's not, we aren't suggesting that at all.
all right, that's fine. That's just me then. All right. Right, so you want to vote on so the first three would be, or the first three is the wind energy, the solar energy, the return of that note to Article 5. And then the fourth one, the floodplain one, is easy to deal with too. And the ADU one, it's up to you, but tonight I'm at another meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, do we want to take the first four?
First
And
four, I'm not prepared to vote on the last three.
yeah, no, I think that's fair.
Mm,
So just looking at the list here, do I have a motion to recommend a favorable decision on PB2, the amendment for solar energy?
So moved.
Second,
Okay, all in favor, we'll do alphabetical. Woody Chidick,
Aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Dave McMorris,
aye.
Matt Watkins, aye. Okay, the next one would be
What about PB1, the wind energy?
Wasn't that the?
yeah, I guess I called out
That,
two,
that's
right?
on the screen. I
Yeah,
guess
so
it doesn't have a number, right?
Yeah, I was looking at a PDF, so I think, yeah, the one I just called out was solar, so the second one, right, would be took them out of order here. PB1 is,
PB1 is wind.
yeah. Okay, so I'll make a motion that we vote for a favorable recommendation of Article PB1, wind energy bylaw.
Second,
Made and seconded.
Woody Chidick, aye.
Mike Dickey,
Aye.
Dave
Dave
McMorris,
Morris,
aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, scroll it down, Tom.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, would it be PB3, the flood and watershed protection? The next one.
In the order they're gonna be presented, the next one is,
Solar, I think we just
Well,
voted that,
yeah, we
Tom,
did.
when you were out.
Yeah, we did solar.
the next one is gonna be,
3.
Good point.
oh, the next one in the order of presentation is gonna be 10.
Okay, and that's the one that
Yeah, all
we
right.
recommended, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion to approve that.
Second,
Made and seconded, all in favor?
Woody Chidick,
Aye.
aye.
Mike Dickey, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
And then next, the fourth one in order will be the floodplain.
Okay, do I hear a motion on that?
So moved. I move that we recommend the floodplain overlay district bylaw PB3.
Motion's been made, is it seconded?
Woody Chidick, aye.
Mike Dickey, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay.
So
Okay, so
those
what-
are,
What's left, Tom? The ADUs?
ADUs, the development impact and mitigation and the land alteration amendments.
And we'll
Okay.
hold those. My understanding is probably, right, Dave, you suggested our November hearing.
Yep, November 12th.
And see, we're gonna deal with, all of them are gonna be open for their public hearings tomorrow, except the mitigation one. That's gonna be specifically on the 16th. Whatever we don't get to tomorrow night will be moved over to the 16th as well, but we're hopefully gonna get through the other 6.
Okay, good. Thanks, Tom.
Good.
So, please participate. Can't tell you when we're gonna get to them. I know we have some other stuff on our agenda tomorrow night to deal with a couple of permits, but
Is that going to be available on Zoom?
it's the only way we meet on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
And I asked Cassandra on Monday, and apparently the state's gonna extend the Zoom requirements again.
But Tom, you brought up an interesting point last week. You and I are probably both in favor, and I'm not the chair anymore, but I mean, the zoning board, at least my understanding is, we'd be in favor of hybrid meetings. Are those not allowed?
No, that's actually, and that's what the state's gonna extend, that you're gonna, if you want anything live, it's gonna have to be hybrid. You're gonna have the Zoom capability, but as I understand the problem, you have that machine that's at Wilcott Commons, and I guess the school committee has one. And you need somebody to operate it. And you need, so town hall staff has to be there. The select board gets the new PR guy. And when we had our forum the other night, we had Cassandra. And, you know, when all these folks work at night, they get comp time. So they're not in the office during the day for their comp time. So it's a staffing problem. I think we could coordinate all the boards. You know, select board meets Tuesdays, right? There's perhaps one Tuesday a month where they conflict with you. We meet Wednesdays. Concom meets Thursdays. I mean, we all could meet at Wilcott Commons and do the hybrid meetings. As I look at it, but it's a
Yeah,
question.
Woody, I did see that after that was brought up at one of our recent meetings, Cassandra did send a note to John Allen and then also to the Chris Senior, just expressing that there was a desire from both planning board and zoning board to have that option. And
Yeah, it's-
as of
Yeah, I was wondering if we could meet alternately with the planning board. I mean, Tom, do you have back-to-back weekly meetings, or is it every couple
No,
of?
we're usually 2 a month, but with the zoning thing, we've been going
Well,
sometimes.
maybe we could work it out, and again, I don't want to jump in front of Dave, our chair, but maybe we could work it out so that the zoning board that meets only once a month could meet maybe in an alternative Wednesday when you're not meeting, because I find it increasingly difficult to look at these large plans, pages after pages, and little detail, how wide is the parking space, and you can't do, it's hard to do it in Zoom.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And, you know, one of the issues with the harbor project was that it was the first one we did on Zoom, and I don't think people ever got the sense of how big it was gonna be. But,
Yeah, so maybe
as I say,
collectively
it's,
you and Dave could get together, put your heads together or something.
select board seems to be going almost every week, so they're the ones you'd have a conflict with on a Tuesday. But again, my understanding, it's more of a staffing problem. The equipment is there, the room is there, the scheduling can all be worked out between 4 boards.
I think we could go to the select board and see if they could fund, for heaven's sakes, once a month, overtime for a couple of hours for one person, if that was the impediment.
Yeah.
I don't know. Dave, what do you think? Do you think the sentiment could be managed?
Yeah, I mean,
Or you teach one member of every board how to run the machine.
yeah, there's that possibility as well.
I don't know if that's feasible.
I'm age exempt.
Most of us are.
Not like me, but I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's a solution if that's the impediment.
I've
But
been,
I don't,
I've
mean,
been
I'll leave
preaching
it
it
up
for
to,
two
I'll
years.
leave it up to the two chairs to kind of.
Yeah,
wrestle.
I've said it, I've preached it since I've been on, for 2 years now to switch. And again, that, as I understand, is the sole problem. We have 2 pieces of equipment, and I don't know if there's any thought of one of the other boards using the school department's meeting room and their equipment and their staff to run it, but we never think in those terms, but that's it. 2 pieces of equipment, 5 boards at least that need to use them. Concom, us, you, select board and school committee. And all that's got to be worked out, and but somebody has to run the Zoom machine, and it's a
We're in
staff.
this day and age, I could almost see it as to be silly, I don't want to solve the problem, but it's sort of a high school project where you get your social service credits or whatever you need to get. I mean, I'm sure there are kids in high school much more adept than anybody we have on staff.
I thought in the old days, the school committee did do that, like when they were to show their meetings on television, that there was some high school kid in the room running the TV and the camera.
Well, I just personally think it'd be worth
Oh,
pushing a little bit more.
but the state apparently is going to extend the rules to, so that if we do go live, we'll have to be hybrid. So unless we can come up with that.
Which is fine to me. I mean,
Either Zoom only or hybrid is going to be our choice, and it's going to stay that way, it looks like, for the foreseeable future.
Well, Zoom had its weaknesses, has its weaknesses, but anyway, enough said for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I forgot my plug, so I'm running out of battery time here, so 19%, so.
I know, I think we're in good shape, but yeah, thanks again, Tom,
Yeah,
for
thank you.
coming
Just let me
forward
Yeah,
know.
for
thanks,
for your
Tom.
efforts.
Yeah,
Thanks.
just give me a heads up on when you'd want to meet again, just not like last minute, that's all, but I'll be glad to come back anytime you want.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right.
You have a
Thank-
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded.
Woody Chidick, aye.
Mike Dickey, aye.
Dave
Thank
McMorris,
you,
aye.
Julia, by the way. for
Matt
saying-
Watkins, aye. Yeah, thank you,
And-
Julie.
And Julia,
Sincerely.
put an eye in there. I could see her mouth move.
Oh, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks.
night.
Thanks, everybody.